We are gathering here for our next session. Those of you who are out in the lobby area, you might want to return to your seats. So welcome back for this next session of the 2026 annual conference. And this afternoon, we have the distinct privilege of hearing even more in depth from our bishop, from our visiting bishop, Bishop Kigai. And I am so excited to hear what the Lord has laid on his heart, and I know that you don't want to miss it either. So let's welcome this afternoon Bishop Edward Kigai. Blessings. By the Spirit.
Thank you. Oh, I have a mic actually. Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, sisters and brothers. I told my friends here in Alabama that, we've been fed so well like royal family. I have a plan to go back and do extra exercise. It's been a challenge to be here visiting. But I just thank God for your hospitality, and it's beautiful to see the body of Christ being together. Can we pray? Oh, loving God, I thank you so much for this time together with sisters and brothers of North Alabama Conference. I pray your blessing upon all of us. Help us, Lord, to be bold and to go into this world to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. Lord, I thank you that you transformed our lives. And I pray that we can be your light in this world, that we can arise, we can shine, we can go with your light and transform the world. Lord, I'm grateful for the hospitality of my sisters and brothers. I pray that we continue to grow into friendship and relationship and into your holiness. What a great privilege you gave us to be your disciples. Bless this time together. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Well, we've been talking with my friends from Russia and Kyrgyzstan about Alabama a little bit, and we are fascinated with Southern accent. So I remember when I was in my mid-20s, I learned English. I thought I learned English well until I was asked to go and accompany a mission team from Alabama to go to a small town in Russia I never knew existed. And so that's where I learned that life is like a box chocolate. You never know what you're gonna get. And that was the week when I asked this question over and over again. I would say, "Can you repeat it again? Can you repeat it again?" So, but it's truly be a blessing to learn about your culture here, your hospitality, and many wonderful things. So my session today is based on Isaiah 60, verses 1 to 3, the topic of your conference, the theme of your conference. And I want to begin with a little personal story. This is Mount Elbrus in Russia. It's about 18,510 feet, and it's the highest mountain in Europe. I don't know, some people in Europe, in real Europe, they think they have the highest mountain, but Europe, geographically, as you may know, is all the way from Portugal to Ural Mountains in Russia. And so this is the highest mountain in Russia and in Europe. So a couple years ago, we had a fundraising campaign, and I got with my crazy friends, 6 of us, to go to this peak. And of course, we were training a lot, building your muscles of your legs, and your heart was pumping and things like that physically. And then we talked about fundraising, and the fundraising campaign was for children with special needs, children with Down syndrome, with cerebral palsy, and some other mental health problems. And the ministry is done in the south of Russia, city of Voronezh, by our people, the Methodist people. So, but of course they needed funds, and so we got crazy to go to this mountain and raise the funds. But once you get there, you need to acclimate. You go to maybe, let's see, this is a camp. Basically, it's like small wagons with no comfort. It was all like back in USSR, in 1985, and it was all basic. You have this restrooms are outside in another separate wagon, and man, it's a challenge. But it's on a lower level, and you get there, you train, you get acclimated, you go up and down, up and down, up and down. That's the way you acclimate your body, get used to areas where there's not enough oxygen. And that's what the thing that you didn't know. You couldn't train before on a normal situation. You can run, you can do the stairs, but it's hard to simulate the lack of oxygen. But the interesting part of this journey is that you start in the night. So Mount Elbrus is when you calculate your climbing so that you start your decline. You start your return journey at 10 a.m., which means before 10 a.m. you have to get through and then turn around, because after 10 a.m. the weather gets really bad. Could be foggy, could be wind or snow, and you can get lost and die. So almost every week, there's an emergency group taking somebody and rescuing them. So it's all very serious. We got instructions. We had a special instructor with us. But so you start at the night. It's darkness, basically, in the mountains. It's not a city. There's nothing around, so it's all dark. And about midnight, you start your journey. And so about maybe 4 or 5 a.m., the sun is start to rise, and you see this beautiful view. This is the photo I took, I don't know, maybe around maybe 16,000 feet or so. And it's just beautiful. When you see this, all you think about how great is our God that created this beauty. You do not see this when you are on the concrete, city streets, but you see it there, and it's great quietness. That's what I love. I love to go in places where it's quiet, where it's nature, and I can just sit and have a time with God and reflect on my life. And so the highest point I've reached was actually not the top. I couldn't get to the top. So we got to 17,500 feet. That's called the Saddle. There are kind of two mountains, almost the same. One is the Mount Elbrus. And so when we got there from midnight to about 6 a.m. And we were exhausted. I mean, I was exhausted. I was the oldest in the group. And so our instructor, who is 20 years younger than me, he told me, "Bishop, you have to stop here." He told me, "Bishop alive is better than Bishop dead," and I listened, because I was walking my last couple hours. I was walking. You literally go like this. It's very slow, but you don't realize how your body doesn't get enough oxygen, and you cannot think straight. You don't want to eat, which is crazy for me. I always want to eat, but they would force me to drink some, like sweet tea and some candy, and I really don't want anything. It's just such a strange feeling. You feel kind of dizzy, and but yeah, you go slow. And so he evaluated me and my other friend. He told us, two of us, "You guys, you're too old. You stop here." And the two others reached the peak. Of course, they were much stronger and fit and younger, but we were all celebrating. And it's like, to me, it's like going from this dark place in the midnight, going to this wonderful sunshine view into the place where everything is shining. You see the snow, you see the reflection, you have these special glasses. So I'm in the middle here. You see, with this crazy equipment that you rent, I mean, it's all very, very useful, because it's very cold. Even though it's middle of August, I mean, in Moscow, it's like could be like upper 70s, but over there it's cold and could be windy, but the weather was just beautiful. And all I could think about it, it's just praising God, see the light, and happy to go back alive. And so that was our experience, I would say, from dark place to a light on the top of the mountain. So the passage today, it comes from Isaiah 61 through 3, and Conference Superintendent Alan Beasley already preached for us today, which is a great message that you already know. And so I'm just going to take some of the aspects into more deeply, and we can also have a little discussion with each other. I'm going to read this from ESV version. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. For behold, darkness shall cover the earth, and thick darkness the peoples. But the Lord will arise upon you, and his glory will be seen upon you. And nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. Amen. So what I like about Bible verses is that there are many verbs for us. We already heard message this afternoon with highlighted verses. That the verbs, they answer the questions what to do. And these two verbs, arise and shine, are very direct. There is no ambiguity about that. This is something God calls us to do. We can be more philosophical and discuss how we want to rise or how we're going to shine, but it's something that we need to do. It's not for somebody else. It's for all of us as Christians. And also, it's something that God commands. And we talked about obedience these days. We obey God. And when I became a Christian for the first time, many things was hard for me. Like forgive others. I couldn't believe that God can forgive my sins. I need to reconcile with this person, who actually did wrong to me. How come I need to go and approach this person? So many things that were uncomfortable for me. I was too stubborn. But what I learned from the Bible is that if you really want to be a disciple of Christ, you obey God's commands. And so this is something that God commands for us. Arise and shine. And this might be scary for introverts, but this is something that God wants us to do. And of course, it reflects the active life of a Christian. I heard many stories from my American friends how you grew up in a Christian home and you kind of, sometimes people take it for granted, and sometimes people get used to living this life and just settle. But for us as first-generation Christians, first-generation Methodists in Russia and Eurasia, if you come on Sunday worship in our churches in Eurasia, all of these people are committed people. There are no just nominal Christians in our churches, because you go against the flow, because the society don't have a negative image of Protestants. The society has very anti-Western sentiments, because, it's like Methodist, you're like a Western church. We have Russian Orthodox Church, so you're like a kind of some kind of sect. So our people are truly active Christians. So it's for many of them, it's a sacrifice, because some of them may lose a job, or your family can put a lot of pressure. I became a Christian in 1992 when I heard the gospel from American missionary in Moscow. And when I became a Christian, I called my family, my mother, my brother, my sister, my father, and I thought, they're going to be so happy I became a Christian. And all of their reactions were just difficult for me. My father said, well, you go to church, does it make you rich? And I'm like, Father, this is not about money. It's, I go, it's a volunteer organization. I go because I get spiritually fed. He was not happy. He thought, I go to engineering school in Moscow. I got to be an engineer and make more money. But it just was hard. And then my mother would say, maybe you can come visit home. I'm a little worried about your mental health, And so I actually did intentionally went home so that they can see me, touch me, and testify that I'm okay. And then my brother, he laughed at me, said, "Oh, you're going to be like Pope in Rome or something," And my sister was like, "Oh, all this is, kind of not real, and why do you spend time on that?" So it was very painful for me. But again, what I learned from a missionary, I learned from the Bible that we obey God. If I want to be a disciple of Christ, may not be easy, but I follow Christ. I obey God. And so, arise is the theme of our conference, sisters and brothers. And when you hear word arise, what image comes to your mind? Arise can have a different meaning. You can arise physically. I read one day that difference between Asian and Western cultures. Like in Asian cultures, we sit like this, right, on the floor. Oftentimes, still in Kyrgyzstan, some people do that, in Kazakhstan, in my Korean background family. And they say it's good for you because you actually, when you arise from the floor, your muscles work hard. And the more you do that, the more kind of exercise you get and, the more fit you get. But when you sit in a chair all the time, you get so comfortable that your muscles get weak. So it's important to arise. And you can arise, from some kind of a challenge that you have. And so these are some of the examples on the screen. You can arise when you wake up from the sleep. John Wesley preached about sleeping Christian, right? So sometimes we get settled, and or we kind of get into routine. And I was really glad that Bishop Carlin asked us a question: when was the last time we actually shared the gospel with a non-believer? And for many of us as pastors, it could be challenging. We get in the circle of good sisters and brothers, and do not meet on a regular basis unless we make it very intentional. And so we can arise from that sleep. And then another possibility is overcoming a difficult challenge. And I want you to think about what challenge maybe you go through. When we were moving up, climbing to the Mount Elbrus, that was a big challenge. Even though we were physically fit and trained for it, but again, the lack of oxygen is something you cannot predict how your body will react. For some people, it's no problem. For others, it's a big challenge. And so you arise to overcome a difficult challenge. And then you can also arise from a fallen position. Sometimes we fall. It could be physical, it could be spiritual. And I don't know about you, brothers and sisters, but my heart is breaking all the time when I read almost weekly news in the Christian world when there's some kind of a sexual abuse in the church building or some kind of a money abuse by a church leader or another scandal. And it's like my heart breaks because it's kind of put a negative shadow on all of us as Christians. When I meet Christians, non-Christians in Russia, and I share the gospel, and they say, "Oh, we don't believe you because you do this, or the church is scandal with that," and so people already have heard all this negative stuff, and but we know as Christians that God is our forgiving God, and even if you fall, God can lift you up, God can forgive you, and God can help you from your situation. And so when we look at the context of Isaiah, sisters and brothers, it's an interesting situation because historically it's what it's called a post-exilic situation. So they came back from the Babylonian exile and they come back to Jerusalem. And all this they see is this just ruined city, and everybody is in depression. And it's very hard to believe that now we can arise and shine and be a great nation like we once were. And many people have a hard time to believe. And I can identify with that. You know, like I grew up in the Soviet Union, and in 1987 I finished my high school and moved from Almaty, Kazakhstan to Moscow to study hydraulic engineering. And so while I was a student in Moscow, you know, we had perestroika and glasnost, Mikhail Gorbachev, you may remember that era. And in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. So all of a sudden I have a passport, but no country. It says Soviet Union, but there's no Soviet Union. So I had this special military course in my school at university. You know, we were trained to be engineers in the Cold War time, Cold War era. You know, I was taught that U.S. is our #1 enemy with over 5,000 nuclear warheads, is going to bomb us, and we need to prepare and protect our country. And so I thought that was a good thing to do. And you know, in our university, we would have a special military class where we would come and sign up papers every time we come in that we do not share this with anybody for 15 years. It's called classified material. They will close the curtains with soundproof curtains, and they would shoot documentaries about U.S. nuclear missiles. It's supposed to be a top secret, right? But that's what they showed us. And then after that, the colonel would come and say, you are Soviet engineers, you need to build better missiles to protect our country. And so that's the mindset we grew up. And then in 1991, in August, the country collapsed. So everything we believed, many of us believed, especially older generation, my parents' generation, all was destroyed. You know, there's no more communism. The socialism is not going to protect you. Your pensions, if you are retired at that time, all your pensions savings are gone, like in almost 1 week, because inflation was crazy. And literally, I was a student. We got a stipend from government, from university. And you want to go and buy something, use that rubles, because tomorrow they will be devalued like 50%. But when you go to the grocery store, there's nothing to buy. So everybody was just crazy, running around, trying to save money, earn money, and just to survive. So today, you know, we eat porridge sometimes in the morning as a healthy food, but at that time, we ate porridge like 3 times a day. You know, I got tired of porridge, but it was the cheapest food we could afford at that time when we were students and lived in the dorm. So many of us were just depressed. You know, no future. Many people immigrated from Russia in early 1990s because people had no hope, and they couldn't believe that we can have a better life. And so that kind of a state of despair is also in that time of the book of Isaiah. People just cannot believe that life could get better. And there is a short story by Anton Chekhov. Anybody heard Anton Chekhov, a Russian writer? Oh, thank you. So I love his short stories. They're very short, but it's like a gospel message, basically. There's certain morale in that. So there's a short story called Student. I recommend to read. Could be like only 15 minutes read. And basically the story of a student of a seminary, theological seminary, and he's very depressed and in big despair. He goes on the streets of, I think it's St. Petersburg, Russia, and back, you know, over a century ago. It was cold winter, you know, our winters could be really depressing because there's no sunshine, like for 6 months, it's very difficult. And so he sees poor poverty, and he thinks, you know, how come this goes on in our society? And then he sees these single mothers who are very poor, and they talk with him, and he talked with them, and he shared a gospel message with them. And all of a sudden, he sees the girls crying, and he spent some time with them, and then he moved forward. And afterwards, he reflects on this incident, and he thinks, how beautiful it is that he shared the gospel and somebody's life was touched and this girl was transformed. And so from despair to joy, that's the basic point of this short story, that when he started to share the gospel, he himself started to experience joy, even though in the beginning of the story, he had this depression and despair. And so, sisters and brothers, it's a beautiful power of the gospel, that sometimes we feel like, there's so many obstacles, so many challenges. We fall here and we fall there, but God has a beautiful, beautiful plan for us. He can help us arise, and He can help us shine. And so, just like Isaiah speaking to his society, that the glory of the Lord is going to come, something that is beyond our imagination. And sisters and brothers, I really admire your country, because whenever I come to the United States, what I feel compared to my society is this is the land of possibilities. People say it's possible. People say, I can do it. We can do it. People say God will help us. And people believe and start businesses, start new churches, overcome difficulties. In our culture, I don't know, I might be biased, but sometimes we complain a lot. And maybe it's a Soviet, past that really kind of beaten us too much. Because in the Soviet time, you have this bureaucracy, right? And you go to one room and they say, oh, come next week. You come next week and they say, oh, you need to go to this specialist and then to this specialist. And you feel like, you're moving around, but nothing moves forward. And you get depressed and then you give up. And so this passage encourages us. And you have this gift of encouragement. Sisters and brothers, you need to realize that. Whenever you go into this world, people look up to you as sisters and brothers, as Americans, as people from North Alabama. And people know that you're going to encourage them. And I believe you have a source of encouragement. And that's a beautiful thing, sisters and brothers. You can help people to arise and shine. And just like Isaiah was encouraging his people, we are today are called to arise and shine. Our time is very short, I was told, so I'm going to go a little fast, although it's hard for me to speak fast, but I want to highlight main points. So the questions, maybe this could be a homework for you. Maybe you can take a picture, and these are some questions for you to reflect. What do I need to arise from? Maybe it's lack of faith. Maybe you think we don't have enough money to do this program. Or maybe you think, oh, I'm not so equipped. Maybe somebody else should do this. What do you need to rise from? What does our church need to rise from? We heard story these days that some churches are refusing, to hear about new church plant. There's this certain stigma in many parts of the world. When I was a pastor, we had a retreat with my church, and we had a survey. There were different questions, and some questions were like, what is our strength? And then some of the questions were, what is our weakness? And when we read the results, there was this answer, what is our strength? Somebody wrote, we are like a family. We were like, yo, everybody's happy. And then, what is our weakness? Somebody wrote, we are like a family. You understand that? We're like a family, and it's very hard for new people to come in our circle. You know what I mean? And but our mission is go into the world. So what do we need to rise from as a church? And what does our conference need to rise from? I don't know. That's something for your homework, maybe for your leaders or for committees. You know, I come here as a guest, I see everything positively. So I don't know. If there are some challenges or problems, I don't see them, I don't know them, and you know better. So I trust that you can do this homework and make some analysis. And then when we go further, the next part is shine. Shine, sisters and brothers. And let me share. So these are some of the words in this passage that says that your light has come. And it reminds us that God is our light. So these people were depressed in Jerusalem. I was depressed in the early 90s because my country was destroyed, basically, and didn't seem to have future. But Christian people came to our country and says, God is our light. You can trust the Lord. You can follow Jesus Christ, and your life will be transformed. And that was a great uplifting message, great encouragement for us. I became a believer, you know, and my life has changed. And then it says also, glory of the Lord. That's the source of our life and light. Again, like we prayed this afternoon with Reverend O'Connor, he said it's the stress that we carry. You know, we need to put it down because it's God's glory. You know, sometimes we think we need to do something. We are busy organizing, and certainly God gave us these gifts. But what's the source? The source of our light, the source of our life. This is what we are about, sisters and brothers, when we come as conference to remind ourselves that it's God's glory, it's the source of our light. And then I wanna expand a little bit about light versus darkness. There are many passages in the Bible where these two things are juxtaposed. And from the very beginning, when God created the world, He separated darkness from light. And we see passages in the Bible where it says about, list different sinful things as darkness. I think many of us experience darkness in our lives, whether it's, our enemies, spiritual enemies, or enemies at work, or maybe it's some kind of dependencies like alcoholism or drugs. We see how people's lives just go dark. And this is real. These are our sisters and brothers, our friends. Almost everybody I know knows somebody in their family or circle of friends who has suffered from that darkness, dependencies. And sisters and brothers, there is light. God reminds us that light has come. And we know the Messiah, the message of Isaiah, if we read the book of Isaiah, we quote this message for Christmas, that the baby is born, the Messiah, Jesus Christ, will bring salvation. That's our hope, and that's the light that will come. And this light will overcome darkness. Jesus spoke and said, I'm the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Jesus is our light. And so when I studied psychology, there's this called dark triad. I don't know, anybody heard this term, dark triad? That's an interesting concept. And even though you may not go in depth and understand much of it, I'm sure everybody experienced that at some point in their life. So the dark triad is three parts. It's narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. So I'm not going to go into the science of it, just briefly mention or give you examples of that. So for example, narcissism, it's when person is so obsessed with their own needs, their own glory. It's all about me. So we have a joke in Russia. Who is the narcissist? Narcissist is somebody who think about himself more than about myself. So that's a joke. But seriously speaking, there's so many problems in today's world. There's so many narcissistic behaviors. Sometimes we are guilty of that as parents, giving everything to our children and not helping them to overcome their difficulties on their own. Sometimes we think of our own needs or selfishness, what's good for us, and not care for the others. And as Christians, this is just contrary to what Jesus teaches us. And so when the light comes, the light teaches us to look for the needs of others. And whenever our pastors are ordained or leaders are called as a bishop, I remind them that you are here to serve others, not that others to serve you. You are here for the sake of the church. You are here for the sake of the world. And it might be difficult sometimes because we also have needs. We are human beings. We have our limits. But at the heart of it is the light that should overcome darkness, the darkness of narcissism. And then the Machiavellianism is connected to Machiavelli, who wrote a book about basically how to stay in power. And, we, as Christians, our task is to raise many leaders in our church. When you raise a leader, what kind of leaders do you raise? The world is teaching us that you should become a boss in charge and you tell others people what to do. But what does Jesus say? He says, can you endure the cup that is prepared for you? Can you do that? Can you carry the cross? And again, Jesus says, if you want to be first, you be the last. If you want to be in charge, you become a servant. You become a slave to others. And that's, for some people, it is very hard to grasp. I had an example in my pastoral ministry when we had some students from Africa in my church, and they brought new students. And so after worship service, we have meal in cafeteria, and I greeted new students, and I said, sit down, we'll have a conversation. And I went to the kitchen, I took some plates with food, and I came over and gave it to them, and we sat and talked. And so that was just a simple, regular Sunday for me. But then later, one of the African students, he told me, I was not a bishop at that time. He told me, Pastor Edward, our students were shocked. I said, why? He said, well, how come you as a pastor, you serve them meal? And I'm like, what's special about that? He said, oh, they never experienced that. In their culture, in their country, the pastors have, usually others serve pastors. Usually pastors have like separate room and separate table and sometimes even a separate meal. And I'm like, I respect different cultures. I don't want to offend anybody, but as Christians, I don't want to be seated in a separate room. I don't want to be seated and fed by a special meal, different from others. I want to be with the people. And I think that's what Jesus teaches us, sisters and brothers, that we are the light of the world. We are to be servants. We are not to be holding onto power, but giving power to others. And then the last one is psychopathy. And I believe there's nobody with that problem here. But in my country, the history is very painful. Many of you know Joseph Stalin, right? So I'm going to tell you a brief story. Almost finished, Alan. So the brief story is about Joseph Stalin. Like in 1930s, millions of people went to Gulag. Basically, it's North Siberian camps where people had a heavy labor and many of them died. And many of them were not guilty, really. It's just political oppression, basically. And so everybody knows that history. But the recent history of Russia, about 10 years ago, was very shocking to me because there was a survey. You vote on your phone for a hero of Russia. who is the most respectful hero in the history of Russia. So Alexander Nevsky was number one. He was the chief commander warrior against the Swedes back in, I don't know, many centuries ago. But number two was Joseph Stalin. That was shocking to me. How come we, as a country, where many families lost their loved ones in Gulag during 1930s and 1940s and 1950s even, how can we now want to have a leader or a respectful figure who has this psychopathic, craziness by killing people? So that just tells you the country we live in. We are like, we have a problem. On the one hand, we have some of the best things in the world. Like we have Yuri Gagarin who went to space. We have great scientists, philosophers, Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. But on the other hand, we have this psychopathic leadership in our history. And so, sisters and brothers, I want to remind you that Jesus gives us light that overcomes darkness. Jesus can help us arise and shine. And so I want to just again, because of the lack of time, I want to raise these questions for your reflections for the future. What kind of darkness have you experienced from others? What kind of darkness have you struggled with in yourself? What kind of darkness you see in your context and how you can shine there? So, sisters and brothers, I want to encourage you, let's arise and shine in this world. May God bless you. Thank you very much.
Okay. I'm looking for Alan, and there he is. You want me to announce it, Alan? Okay. So we've got a 15-minute break. We'll be back in here right after 3:30. We'll start our business session. So same as before, sip of water. For those of you who may ask, this small of a break, just a short break. And then we'll be back in here and gather for our business session. A few things we got to cover, take care of our budget, our nominations, let you know about a few things, introduce you to our ordination class. So we'll see you in just about 15 minutes. Thank you.